From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. "24 years ago, late on a March evening, in a smart corner of London, 3 people were posing for a photograph. One that would eventually change their lives forever.
It's a photograph like I think a lot of us took 20 years ago. It looks like it's been developed at a chemist. Badly lit, a flash bouncing off the back of a window in what looks like quite a grand house. Gold-framed pictures, big drapes, and 3 people in it, 2 middle-aged, 1 young. The man is casually leaning against a wall. He looks very formally dressed. He's got a shirt, cufflinks, all the trappings of affluence, basically. And so does the older woman. She's tanned, she's wearing a kind of designer roll neck. And by contrast, this very young girl, who the man has his arm looped around, is wearing like a very small vest top and some sort of crazy patterned jeans. You know, if you came to this completely innocent, you might think 2 loving parents and a daughter, a teenage daughter.
The reality was much, much darker, as the world discovered 10 years later when that picture was published, after the young girl in the vest top went to the press with her explosive story. Looking at it now, everything has changed for all 4 people attached to that photograph. The man behind the camera, the financier Jeffrey Epstein, was convicted as a paedophile and is now dead. The man in the shirt with the expensive cufflinks, Prince Andrew, has been banished from public life, and the socialite Ghislaine Maxwell, the woman in the designer roll neck, is behind bars. And the young woman in the picture, Virginia Giuffre, tragically killed herself last week. So how did a girl from Florida, who grew up in a well-to-do neighborhood, end up being sexually trafficked around the world? And was justice really done for her and for dozens of other survivors? The story today: the life and death of Virginia Giuffre. Would you mind just starting by introducing yourself to our listeners?
My name is Helen Rumbelow. I am a feature writer for The Times.
Helen, tell us when you heard that Virginia Giuffre had died.
I was just at home on a Saturday and heard the news, and instantly that name carries so much resonance. I think I felt really very sad for her children, her family, and everyone that had been inspired by her to speak out about sexual abuse.
We'll come back to what happened to Virginia Giuffre. Before we do, though, going back to the start, tell us about who she was. You know, where was she born? What was her upbringing like?
Yeah, she was born Virginia Louise Roberts. She had a very kind of sunny start to her life. She was born in Sacramento, California, 1983, the daughter of Sky Roberts, an engineer, and his wife, Lynn, who was in banking. She had a couple of stepbrothers, Daniel and also Sky. And when she was 4, they moved to Florida, Palm Beach, where her father worked at Mar-a-Lago, foreshadowing alert, This is Trump's big resort. But they lived, it seems like quite idyllically, 2 acres of land, chickens, goats, horses. She had a horse called Brumby.
Sweet. It does sound, as you say, very sunny. This is a great start in life. When did it all start to go wrong?
It was at the age of 7, and this is really a pattern that we see in her first couple of decades that she was targeted and exploited by older men. So she was sexually abused by a family friend who she says started using bedtime as an occasion to sexually assault her. She then understandably became quite troubled. She was hanging out with older children, smoking drugs. Later on, her parents split up, more destabilization, and she packed some bags, and on one Easter Sunday morning, she climbed out a window and ran away, hitchhiked to San Francisco, where she, I think, thought she'd reach a kind of haven of welcoming hippies from the kind of 70s, but actually, it was just a sort of dangerous place for a young person to be. She eventually made her way back to Florida. She was back in Miami at the age of 13. So she's really just a child at this point. She was homeless for a while. She lived in foster care for a while. She slept with men in exchange for food.
I was just so mentally scarred already at such a young age, and I ran away from that. I found nothing on the streets except for hunger and pain and abuse, and it was scary. I wanted to get out of it.
That's a very rough start to life, really. What happened next?
Well, again, there's a pattern here of kind of false hopes and her attempts to get herself back on track being actually really sort of cruelly thwarted. But she sees this salvation coming in the form of a black stretch limo pulling up to her as she's on the street. And this man, Ron Eppinger, who owned the modeling agency Perfect 10, lured her in with a promise of job, glamour, everything that a young girl in her position would want. Unfortunately, he was running a front for international sex trafficking. And at his luxury apartment, he, according to her, gave her pills to help her relax and then assaulted her.
That's horrific.
Yeah. Ultimately, he passed her to a friend. And in 1999, the friend's home was raided by the FBI, and she was sent back to her father in Palm Beach.
What happens back in Palm Beach?
It's the late 90s. She's back with a family member. She's around 15, and she really resolves at this point to start afresh. And her father, remember, is doing maintenance at Donald Trump's big resort, Mar-a-Lago, and he manages to get her a job. She's working as a lowly locker girl in the spa. It's only $9 an hour, but for her, this is great. She's got a job, she's got stability in the form of her father, and she's got some dreams. She's thinking about training as a massage therapist, and she's observed reading books on anatomy. So we can really see someone, really trying to get out of whatever hell she's gone through.
So there she is at Mar-a-Lago with a job that gives her hope, the opportunity to make something of her life in a very wealthy resort, surrounded by very wealthy people.
Yeah. And this is the exact moment when the paths of these four people start to intersect. And the first of these is Ghislaine Maxwell, who's staying in the resort. She spots Virginia Roberts, as she is then. And there's something about her that catches her eye. And later, Virginia Giuffre would say it was specifically the vulnerability and damage that Giuffre had endured that appealed to someone like Ghislaine Maxwell.
And this is Ghislaine Maxwell, who is the wealthy socialite daughter of the British media tycoon Robert Maxwell, in a very rich resort in Palm Beach, running across a poor locker girl.
Yes, and she spots Virginia reading a book on anatomy and starts talking to her about massage and says She knows this extremely rich, wealthy, powerful man that would like someone to work for him as a massage therapist. And almost immediately, Virginia Giuffre is excited by this possibility. And, heartbreakingly, she runs over to her father. This is something she said later. She ran over to him working on the tennis courts and told her dad, "You're not going to believe this."
I ran over to my dad, who works on the tennis courts at Mar-a-Lago, and he knows I'm trying to fix my life up at that point, which is why he got me the job there. And I said, "You're not going to believe it, Dad. I just got offered an interview, but if he likes me for the interview, then they're going to train me as a real masseuse, a real massage therapist."
So the whole family really is excited for this opportunity.
This is such a moment. This is such a great hope for them after things have been quite bleak for a few years. What happens?
So her father, very well-meaning, drops her off at Epstein's luxurious waterfront house.
And this is the rich man Ghislaine Maxwell was talking about.
Yes.
Her on and off boyfriend at the time.
Yes, Jeffrey Epstein. And Giuffre later talks about it happening very quickly.
Helen walks me up the stairs, and then there's this naked guy laying on a massage table in the middle of the room.
Maxwell explains that the billionaire enjoyed a daily massage and offered to sort of show Giuffre the ropes.
So she's like, "Okay, here's the lotions, here's the oils. Put your lotions and oils on your arm. Always keep your hand on the person you're massaging, and start with one foot, and she'll get the other foot, and then we'll work together. So you just mimic my movements."
During the training massage, Giuffre tells them a bit more about her past.
Through that time, they were asking me questions about who I was, and they seemed like nice people, so I trusted them, and I told them I'd had a really hard time in my life up until then. I'd been a runaway, I've been sexually abused, I've been physically abused.
She believes they're sympathetic, but
that was the worst thing that I could have told them, because now they knew how vulnerable I was.
And that very night, the sexual abuse starts.
Oh, that's so devastating. How has she described what happened to her while she was with them?
So that first night almost set a template. She said it became a daily routine, sometimes involving other girls. She said later, basically, I was training to be a prostitute for him and his friends who shared his interest in young girls. She would be taken on flights around the world. His plane, Boeing 747, was nicknamed the Lolita Express. She says she was passed around to rich men like a platter of fruit. There was a kind of very cruel twist to the way Epstein operated, which a lot of the girls later described as being psychologically extremely complicated and damaging, was that he asked them to recruit more girls for him.
All Jeffrey cared about was, go find me more girls. To me, still to this day, it is my biggest shame that I carry around that I will never get rid of. And I'm really, really sad that I brought other girls my age and even younger into a world that they should have never been introduced to.
So it was a kind of Ponzi scheme of abuse, which a lot of them feel incredible amount of guilt and responsibility for, as well as themselves being victims.
And they were so young. I mean, she was 15, 16 at this time?
They were so young. And actually, at some point, I think she was just 17, Epstein joked to her that she was quickly becoming too old for him.
Wow. How was she coping with everything she was experiencing at that time?
She was obviously in a lot of trauma. She said she took drugs to get her through.
I was horrified, I was sad, I was angry, I was disgusted. I was a shell, and the only way that I could cope with what I was going through was taking Xanax. And Xanax is like an anti-anxiety tablet. It took away that feeling of anger, sadness, it made me feel numb, and it helped me cope with what was going on at the time.
You said earlier that this story is really about the intersection of four characters. It's the coming together that makes it the global story it became. You've got Ghislaine Maxwell, who meets Virginia Roberts as she was then. She introduces her to Jeffrey Epstein. Tell us about the fourth character in all of this.
She had been traveling with Jeffrey Epstein and Maxwell to Europe. They visited the French Riviera for Naomi Campbell's birthday party. They then went to London, where Maxwell had a townhouse in Belgravia.
The first time in London, I was so young. Ghislaine woke me up in the morning and said, "You're going to meet a prince today."
And according to Virginia Giuffre, one evening, Prince Andrew, the Duke of York then, visited, and they ate in a nearby restaurant, and then they moved on, she says, to Tramp, this kind of quite posh, exclusive nightclub.
Prince Andrew got me alcohol. It was in the VIP section. I'm pretty sure it was vodka. Prince Andrew was like, "Let's dance together." And I was like, okay.
She claims that she danced with Prince Andrew, who was touching her, and after an hour in this club, he was dripping with sweat, which later became a contentious part of the whole story. They went back to Maxwell's home, and that is where that photo was taken.
We leave Club Tramp, and I hop in the car with Ghislaine and Jeffrey, and Ghislaine said he's coming back to the house, and I want you to do for him what you do for Epstein. I couldn't believe it.
She says she was asked to sleep with Prince Andrew. She was left alone with him, she says, after that photograph was taken, for what she called the longest 10 minutes of my life.
He wasn't rude or anything about it. He said, thank you, and some kind of soft sentiments like that, and left.
She says Epstein paid her $15,000, and that later Ghislaine was said to have told her, "You did well, he had fun."
Which does sound very dark. Did she meet Prince Andrew again?
Yes, she says that she had sex with him on 2 more occasions. Once on Epstein's Island in the Caribbean, once in Manhattan. He claims that he never met her, and he doesn't recollect any of her story.
As you've described, she gets sucked into this world as a very young teen. It's now been a few years that she's been travelling around with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. How does she manage to escape that life?
As a 19th birthday gift, Jeffrey Epstein agrees to send Virginia Roberts to a massage training course in Thailand.
Which ironically is what she wanted when she first met them.
Ironically, but she meets someone, an Australian martial arts instructor, Robert Giuffre, and they almost immediately decide to get married.
I escaped. I called Jeffrey to let him know that I was not coming back, and he said, "You know what? Have a nice life," and hung up the phone. And that was it. And I thought, I'm off the hook, I'm off the chain, I can go, I can live free. 2007, I was pregnant.
They're married within 10 days. It does look like the panicked actions of a sort of person who desperately needs to escape. And she then moves with him to Australia, which I wonder if that was part of the appeal. She essentially moves as far away as she possibly can from London and New York.
She manages to put an ocean between her and Epstein. How does that turn out?
I mean, remarkably, she does have a few decades of stability, and she finds a meaningful life, having 3 children, living peacefully and for the first few years, without any public profile in the west coast of Australia near Perth. Things are really looking up for her, but sadly, it wasn't to last.
Helen, it sounds like Virginia Giuffre had managed to turn her life around. When does the past catch up with her?
So it's several years since she's really been born again as Virginia Giuffre, not Roberts. She's managed to bring up children. She's living in a quiet town in the west coast of Australia near Perth. But 3 police officers, including one from the FBI, turn up at her door and they tell her, "Do you know anything about this man called Jeffrey Epstein?" And thanks to hidden cameras in his homes, she had been identified as one of his victims.
And when is this? When does all of this come to a head?
It's in 2008. That's when the charges against Epstein are first brought in Florida. So he gets a very favorable deal from prosecutors. Florida is known for harsh sentences. He could have faced life in prison. But instead, he got an 18th-month prison sentence and really got a sweetheart deal. He was allowed to have his driver pick him up for work every morning, take him to the office. He had an unlocked cell. He was barely there in prison and ended up not even serving 18 months. Then a year or two later, in 2009, a couple of dozen anonymous women come to a financial settlement with Jeffrey Epstein. Undisclosed amount. Virginia Giuffre was one of them. She was simply known then as Jane Doe 102.
So at that stage, there's at least some form of compensation for some of the horrors that she's sort of gone through.
Yes.
But the story doesn't quite go away. Just remind us when it suddenly comes to a fore again.
So a year after the Epstein settlement, 2010, Prince Andrew is pictured in Central Park with Epstein. So he's visited him at his very expensive townhouse in Manhattan. Giuffre sees this. She sees that basically justice has not been brought in her eyes. He's there in Manhattan strolling around, and she's just given birth to her daughter. So she is thinking very much of a next generation of young women and how damaging it would be for them to see someone like Jeffrey Epstein not brought to justice. She takes, I think, a very brave decision to go public. So she's not Jane Doe anymore. And she sells her story to the Mail on Sunday. She releases the photograph of Prince Andrew. This is really explosive.
There's a huge sensation when that story came out. And then it sort of went quiet for a while, but it never quite went away. It comes back again a few years later. Just describe what happens.
Rumours keep swirling about Prince Andrew and his connections with Jeffrey Epstein and whatever did or didn't happen with Virginia Giuffre. He decides to fight back with this now infamous interview with Newsnight and the journalist Emily Maitlis.
We've come to Buckingham Palace in highly unusual circumstances. Normally, we'd be discussing your work, your duty. We'll come on to that. But today, you've chosen to speak out for the first time.
In that interview, he categorically denies any contact with Virginia Giuffre.
Despite the photograph?
Despite the photograph.
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
You don't remember meeting her?
No.
He says he has no recollection of a photo of them being taken together. He has his various explanations for why her story has holes. So he has, for instance, what he regards as a very credible alibi of this evening that they spent in tramps.
That couldn't have happened because the date that is being suggested, I was with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at I suppose, sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon.
And his other point of evidence put forward by him is that the fact that she said he sweated made her story unconvincing.
There's a slight problem with the sweating because I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time, and that was, oh, actually, yes, I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at.
But despite being given an hour of time and ample opportunity, doesn't really express any remorse for either his continuing loyalty to Epstein or Epstein's victims.
I admit fully that my judgment was probably coloured by my tendency to be too honourable, but that's just the way it is.
That interview was catastrophic for Prince Andrew. Immediately, charities and companies and universities all wanted to distance themselves from him. He ended up being forced to step back from all royal duties. And it strengthened the case for Virginia Giuffre. She brought legal action specifically against Prince Andrew in New York, alleging non-consensual sex. And he vowed to defend himself. He has always denied any wrongdoing. But ultimately, in 2022, he settled for an undisclosed sum, some estimates at $12 million, part of which went to her charity that she set up, SOAR, Speak Out, Act, Reclaim, in support of victims of sex trafficking.
In the meantime, while Prince Andrew is fighting a long legal case, just remind us what's happened to the other characters in all of this.
Jeffrey Epstein was rearrested in July 2019, just a few months before Prince Andrew's interview on Newsnight, and a few days after he was arrested. This is now August 2019. He was found dead in his prison cell, and the verdict was suicide, although some people questioned that. Then later, in December 2021, Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty of recruiting and trafficking young girls to be sexually abused by Epstein. So she is now serving time in Tallahassee Correctional Facility in Florida.
And was Virginia Giuffre part of that court case?
Yes, she didn't appear in court, but she was very instrumental to the case. She was mentioned 250 times in the proceedings, and the photos of her as a teenager were shown in court. She is the most high-profile victim of Epstein at this point.
So Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell eventually behind bars. Prince Andrew, pretty much in exile. He's no longer a big public figure as far as the royal family is concerned. What impact is all of this having on Virginia Giuffre's life? What's happening to her?
Over the past year, her marriage seems to have deteriorated after 22 years. She was in the middle of a custody battle, and that had turned nasty. She wasn't living with them, with her children. She didn't have access. This is a repeated cause for concern in her social media posts. And that leads to this now notorious Instagram post last month, which is a photo of her bruised, apparently in hospital. She puts out this very dramatic message to accompany it, saying that she'd been hit by a school bus and she had renal failure, and they've given me 4 days to live, and saying that her sort of last wish was to be reunited with her children. So very, very dramatic post, but that quickly starts to be undermined by officials.
What do we know about what had happened to her? Because the picture was brutal. I mean, she was covered in bruises.
Yes, that much remains unclear because the bus driver and the police both report the accident as minor. And she was discharged from hospital, apparently without renal failure. So she experiences a lot of backlash from that post. Those who might have wanted to strengthen Prince Andrew's case would have seen that kind of post with some relief, because their argument has long been that she's some kind of fantasist. And this very strange Instagram post seems to bolster that position. Her family, I think, argued later that post was never meant to be made public. And I think it's very easy to read it sympathetically as a woman with a lot of demons who is in distress.
A month later, it all gets so much worse. What do we know about what happened to her?
She is found dead at her farm in a very remote part of Western Australia. She's 41. Police say they were called to her home in the near Gabby area on the Friday night. They found her unresponsive and the death was not suspicious. Her family say she lost her life to suicide after being a lifelong victim of sexual abuse and sex trafficking.
It is a terrible ending. She's not the only one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims to have met with a really tragic end.
No, and I think we can understand what happened to her in that context. So many of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein carried with them that lifelong burden. There's one, Leah Patrick, who died at the age of 29 of a heroin overdose after being molested by Epstein at 16. Carolyn Adriano died of what was said to be an accidental overdose in May 2023 in a hotel room in Florida. She was 36. She had testified against Maxwell. Dana Nida, also molested by Epstein at 16, said she felt suicidal, and another unidentified woman also later said she felt suicidal. So there were so many lives ruined by Epstein.
And the pressure that came with reporting it too, because he did seem like a very powerful man. I imagine all of that must have really weighed on the people who were giving evidence. I mean, Virginia Giuffre did actually talk about suicide in the past.
Yes, it's easy to dismiss these things as paranoid conspiracies, and obviously the internet is rife with theories. But on the other hand, this story is so extraordinary because of the people involved and their power and their connections and the way that at various points they evaded the law. So you could understand how she was afraid for her life. I mean, in December 2019, someone posted on then Twitter that the FBI will kill her to protect the ultra-rich and well-connected. And Giuffre wrote back, "I am making it publicly known that in no way, shape or form am I suicidal. I've made this known to my therapist and GP. If something happens to me, for the sake of my family, do not let this go away. Too many evil people want to see me quieted."
It sort of gives you a sense of just the fear she must have lived with too, in the middle of those cases.
The fear, and it just also speaks to her bravery in standing up for what she believed in against such a powerful lobby.
About it now. You know, if we can make that point across, that doesn't matter how rich you are, it doesn't matter how powerful you are, there are girls out there that will speak up, and I don't care if it's 10 years later or 15 years later, whenever you're ready to do it, you do it, you know, and you protect the ones that are younger than us. You protect the ones that we didn't protect before. These guys will get it in the end, because us girls are not gonna sit here and just let this keep happening.
do you hope she'll be remembered?
Obviously, there's so much about her life that is dark and painful, but I felt like it was really important as well to focus on what she did so well, which was be that role model for her daughter and be that role model for other victims of sexual abuse in such a public way. And I just found it so touching that she talked about one of the happiest moments of her life as being when the verdict came in on Ghislaine Maxwell, who is, after all, the only person in this whole story now serving time in prison. And she was in Australia, so it came in very early in the morning. She was in bed and her husband woke her excitedly saying, "Guilty, guilty, guilty." And her son, her young son, said, "Mom, you did it." And that was justice. She was, for that moment, I think, free.
That was Helen Rumbelow, feature writer and columnist at The Times. Today's producers were Olivia Case and Hannah Farrell. The executive producer was Molly Guinness. Sound design and theme composition were by Mal Assetto. If you've been affected by anything you've heard in this episode, you can call the Samaritans on 116 123 or Rape Crisis' Sexual Abuse Support Line, which is on 0808 500 2222. And we'll put those numbers in the description of this episode. If you can, do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to get in touch, drop us a line to thestory@thetimes.com. Thanks for listening. See you again soon.